Mystery of Moonshadow. In a kingdom in the woods, far away from everyone, was a king and a queen who just had a baby girl. She was always looking for an adventure and discover new and different things that have never been heard of. But her parents were the complete opposite. They feared the unknown, and that is why they never left their castle. One night, both the king and queen heard something and got up to go check what it was in another room. But they took a few steps inside the room and both screamed as loud as they could. That is why the king and queen do not let their daughter out of the castle too. 15 years later, from the birth of the princess was in her room studying the history of castles when she heard her mom saying, "Aurora, dinner!" As Aurora arrived in the great dining hall for dinner, she gave her mom an angry look and then sat down with sass. The Queen Amelia said, "I know you want to make the dinner, but you were studying, Aurora." "I know I was, Mom," said Aurora, "but I love trying new magical recipes, like the unicorn flower and the spark soup or the mermaid seaweed with jellyfish and crab stew." "I know, darling. Maybe next time," said Queen Amelia. "Okay," said Aurora sadly. The next day, Aurora decided she wanted to go and find a hairy boppin tree, which was her favorite type of tree. It had purple branches and crystal clear leaves, and every month it grows Aurora's favorite pie. Aurora quietly jumped out of her bedroom window and slid down some vines. Once she reached the ground, she made a run for the gate and into the woods. Aurora loves the smell of mystery that lies in these woods, and the sound of silence that makes you think it's too quiet. But Aurora never really stays by the gate for too long, of the fear that one of the guards might see her and tell her to get back inside. So Aurora kept on walking deeper into the woods. Her favorite place on the planet is the woods just outside the gates of her castle. She knows exactly where to go to find the hairy boppin tree. A few minutes later of walking, and she sees the tree. Sadly, the hairy boppin tree does not have any pies on it today. She decides to just take a break and sit next to the tree, admiring how magical it is out in the woods. So here's the hairy boppin tree. I just love this picture. I feel like it really shows the hairy boppin tree, and it shows like what I had in my mind, and I really do like it. I love how it looks. I just love the picture so much, and you can see like you can see that it really captures everything that I was saying. But just a few minutes later, she hears guards shouting her name, but before she can run away, she gets blocked off by one and must head back home. The king and queen are very happy to see her in one piece, but then the king, Alexander, said, "You need to stop going into those woods every day. They are very dangerous." Aurora just rolls her eyes and said, "I'll be in my room." As Aurora is walking off, her dad stops her and said, "We need to tell you a story." Aurora turns around out of curiosity and said, "What story?" The king and queen make her sit down, and the king, Alexander, says, "Way before you were born, a few children went into the forbidden woods. The bravest of the children, and the one who thought he was the leader, was the first to enter the woods. But he only took a few steps before he saw the most terrifying thing." So the girl in the purple is the queen, the girl in the green is Aurora, and then the dad, and then the boy is of course the king. And I I feel like it shows all the emotions that are happening in the scene, because like the dad's angry at Aurora for going out, Aurora doesn't really care, and I feel like it really shows their emotions in this picture very well. Was it a dragon or chimera? Aurora interrupted. No, said Alexander. It was a gnome. It took hold of the children, and no one has seen him since. It took hold of the child, and no one has seen him since. Aurora just said, that was anticlimactic. Amelia said, that is why we don't want you to keep going into those woods. What if the gnome gets you? Aurora said, I have never seen a gnome or any animals besides from birds and a few bugs. The queen put her foot down and said, as your queen, you are forbidden from going into those woods again. Aurora shouts, that's not fair, and storms to her room. A few weeks went by, and Aurora never even made it close to the gate because of the royal guards. But one day she'd had enough. At 12 p.m., when everyone was having lunch, Aurora put on a disguise and quickly made her way to the gate. Once she got to the gate, she did not stop to smell or listen. This time, she ran until she could not see the castle anymore. She felt free and alive. Aurora was thinking back to what she said to her parents about never seeing any mythical animals, and was wondering why that was. But before she could think about it more, she heard her name being called and realized the guards were looking for her. She panicked and ran away from the guards deeper into the woods, when suddenly she stumbled over something and saw it was a gnome. Before she could even see the color of his eyes, he ran away from her. Aurora was just standing there in awe and shock. She finally saw a magical creature. But she could not enjoy it for too long, because she heard the guards calling her name again. Aurora didn't know where to go to hide and thought maybe the gnome might know. So she ran after the gnome. But he saw she was running after him. And so the gnome ran faster to escape from her. Aurora turned around for a few seconds to see if the guards were still following her. But when she turned back, the gnome was gone. He took that opportunity to dash behind a bush close by. But from in the bush, he could see the worry, confusion, and fear on Aurora's face and realized she looked as terrified as he felt, and called to her, giving up his hiding place. The gnome, Moonshadow, said, come hide by me. Without a second thought, Aurora jumped into the bush. So this is Moonshadow. He's of course hiding in his spot, hiding from Aurora. And I love this picture also, and he looks so cute. I feel like Moonshadow just looks so cute in this picture. So after a few minutes, she could hear nothing and decided to say, thank you. As she was stepping out of the bush, Moonshadow asked, what are you hiding from? She replied saying, the guards. Oh, he said, what did you do? They think I stole something. But anyway, thank you again for helping me. He noticed she didn't want to stay on that topic. So then he asked, where are you going now? I don't know, she replied. Well, I have a little room not too far from here, if you need a place to stay for a little while. That sounds lovely, said Aurora excitedly. After a little walk down a path, she saw a large log with windows, a door, and a welcome mat. This is beautiful and perfect, Aurora said. Well, it is yours for the next few days, Moonshadow replied. Aurora stepped inside, and it was the cutest, most wonderful decorated little room she had been in. Moonshadow said, I guess I'll see you in the morning. Okay, night, Aurora replied. The next morning, Aurora wakes up to see a gnome in a uniform. watching her. She is stunned to see another gnome, and this one looks like a god. But then she sees Moonshadow again and calms down a little. He knocks on the door. Aurora said, "Coming!" When she opened the door, Moonshadow said, "How was your sleep?" "Amazing," she replied, with dreams in her eyes. But then she said, "Why the god?" with concern. Moonshadow ignored the question and said, "Let me give you a tour." "Sure," Aurora said with a scrunched face. Moonshadow turned around and signaled the god. Then the god walked into Aurora's room. After a day of sightseeing, Aurora was ready to sleep, but Moonshadow had another idea. "Why don't you come join us for dinner?" Aurora repeated the word "us" in her head and then said, "I guess, why not?" Moonshadow smiled and walked away. He saw that same god that went into Aurora's room, and the god said nothing to Moonshadow. Moonshadow looked suspicious and just nodded. Then the sun had just set, and Aurora was wearing a purple and blue shimmering dress. Heading to the spot Moonshadow said is where the dinner is happening. Aurora knew exactly where he was talking about because the place was right by the hairy bobbin trees. It was a huge table made from an old tree that had fallen down. Moonshadow saw Aurora and said, "Hey Aurora, come sit here." So that's, of course, the table of a tree that has fallen down, and there's all the gnomes sitting there having their dinner. The dinner was going well, and Aurora kept on asking everyone what was in the dishes she was eating because she would have loved to write them down and try them for herself. On the menu was nuts stuffed in fresh fruit, topped with tree sap, and a tree stump filled with vegetables, with one vegetable having a hidden surprise, which is a sweet flower. During eating the vegetable stump, one of the gnomes at the table looked at Moonshadow and said, "Ew! Look at his orange hands!" Everyone was laughing, and Moonshadow looked down. Aurora said confidently, "Hey, that is not very nice to laugh at someone just because they are different or don't look like you." Moonshadow was stunned and didn't know what to say. He didn't really think that she would stand up for a gnome. Shortly after Aurora said that, the dinner finished. Aurora was walking back to her room, but before she could get too far, Moonshadow caught up with her and said, "Thank you. You really didn't need to say that." "It's no problem," she replied. "I hate it when humans or creatures or anything make fun or fear something. There is no reason to fear the unknown. Anyway, night," she said, slowly walking off. Later that night, Moonshadow couldn't get Aurora's words out of his head about not judging something different or new, and he realized maybe he should do just that. The next morning, Aurora wakes up to see that there was no god, but she didn't want to bring it up when Moonshadow arrived. Moonshadow wanted to say thank you again for last night, and did. Aurora replied, "It really was not a problem at all. I could see you felt embarrassed." "Actually," said Moonshadow, and Aurora looked at him with confusion. "I was not embarrassed, just disappointed in myself for falling for the prank." "Prank?" she said with a scrunched face. "Yeah, around here every day one prank has to happen, and I was going on a strike with not getting pranked for 28 days. Moonshadow said sadly. "Oh," said Aurora. "But still, thank you so much." Aurora just looked down. "Hey, I have a cool place we could go," She looked up with excitement in her eyes. So that's, of course, Moonshadow looking sadly down at his hands because he's like, oh man, I fell for the prank. Have you heard of a hairy boppin tree? Said Moonshadow. Yes, Aurora replied, practically screaming. The hairy boppin tree is my favorite tree. Well, did you know the hairy boppin's tree's secret? He said. No, she said. Back, Moonshadow took one of the leaves off the tree. Hey, what are you doing? Aurora said angrily. Then Moonshadow scrunched it in his hand, and snow was coming out of the crystal clear broken leaf. Then all of the leaves in the tree shattered, and all of a sudden it was snowing under the tree. Aurora looked in awe. After all the snow had fallen, Aurora looked at the naked tree sadly. But just in a few seconds, all the leaves were growing back like nothing had happened. Moonshadow said, cool, right? Yes, Aurora replied, not able to hold in her excitement. How many times can you scrunch the leaves? As many times as you want snow. So Aurora grabbed one of the crystal clear leaves and scrunched it. And you guessed it, it snowed. And a few seconds later, the leaves grew back. I think this picture is just so pretty, and it looks so magical, and it shows the crystal clear, it shows like one of the hairy boppin tree leaves close up, and you can see it right before she scrunched it, and I love this picture. It looks so magical and mysterious. I don't know. It's a pretty picture. For the next few days, Aurora and Moonshadow spent a lot of time together, exploring the woods, and Moonshadow showing all the different secrets that the woods have to offer. Like if you put a greeny blue rock by a river, it will make the water in the river go upstream for a few seconds. Or that if you make a popping sound in front of a glimmer-winged butterflies, they split into two butterflies. Aurora was, of course, loving learning about the secrets of the woods, and she did ask Moonshadow a lot of questions around the woods too. Moonshadow could feel he was getting closer to Aurora and maybe even becoming friends with her. He realized these past few days that they have been hanging out and that all humans are not all the same and that he could really trust her. He loved how much she was so interested and inspired in his world that he had to come clean. They were sitting by one of the many rivers in the woods, just watching the water, when he said, Aurora, I need to tell you something. Okay, said Aurora with concern. I have not been completely honest with you, he began to say. I was the one who sent the god that you saw that one morning when you woke up to watch you. What? Said Aurora. I know, not very good of me, but I didn't know if I could trust you. Why wouldn't you be able to trust me? She said back. You don't know the story? What story? Aurora said nervously. A few years before the birth of the king and queen's baby girl, Aurora was going a little red because Moonshadow is talking about her parents. The king and queen started going crazy. They were forcing all of the magical animals away from their castle as they could. If the animals didn't move, they sent hundreds of guards to break down their houses and kick them out. This was strange because before that, the king and queen loved the magical animals and would always be riding the unicorns or holding the dragonary, which is a bunny and a dragon. Aurora could never imagine her parents going anywhere close to a magical creature, let alone ride them. Moonshadow continued, but one day they acted like we did something awful and kicked us out of their kingdom. And that is why I kind of didn't 100% trust you in the beginning. And I am sorry for that. There was a little bit of silence as Aurora was taking in the fact her parents drove all of the magical animals away, and the fact that once upon a time they didn't fear them. Since Aurora didn't say anything, Moonshadow felt he needed to. But that all changed when you stood up for me that one night for dinner, and the words you said after made me feel sick to my stomach. That you wouldn't fear the unknown, and I realized I had to trust you. Moonshadow ended off saying, Aurora, I could never imagine the king. Aurora said, I could never imagine the king and queen doing that. Moonshadow just looked at the ground, but then he stood up and said, I have one more thing to tell you. Oh? Aurora said, sounding sadly. He said, follow me. They walked all the way to the border of the Forbidden Woods and then stopped. What are we doing at the Forbidden Woods? Aurora said scarily. Have you ever been in the Forbidden Woods? Moonshadow said excitedly. She replied, of course not. It is forbidden. It is only forbidden to humans, but it is the home of the gnomes, Moonshadow said proudly, and Aurora looked around the corner to see hundreds of thousands of gnomes and the most adorable houses in logs with windows like the room she had been staying in. But other houses were high up in the trees, others in mushrooms, and then she saw it. The castle. I love this picture so much. I had a few other options for what I could do for the picture of the village, and I landed on this one. It's so pretty. I just love how you can, there's so many details in this picture. There's so many little houses. It really captures that it is a village because there's so many gnomes in the picture, and it's such a pretty picture. It has so much detail in it. The castle was this beautiful structured rock with windows on all sides. The grandest front door Aurora has ever seen. She was just looking at this gnome kingdom with shock because for years she thought the Forbidden Woods was this terrifying place, but actually it was the most beautiful little kingdom Aurora had ever seen. Moonshadow said with pride, welcome to the kingdom of Whimshizer. Aurora said in amazement, this is where you live? Yep, he replied. Which one is your house? Aurora asked. Moonshadow said, pointing to the castle. Wait, Aurora said. You are the king? Yes, I am, Moonshadow said with pride and shy. Aurora was just there, open-mouthed. Anyway, why don't you come and see my castle from the inside? Aurora said, inviting her in. I would love to, but first I need to tell you something, she said shyly. I am actually Princess Aurora, and the king and queen in your story are my parents, Queen Amelia and King Alexander. Oh, he said, first still letting it sink in. Then he said, do you know why your parents were forcing us away? No, but I want to find out, Aurora said, aggressively thinking of her parents. I'm going to go back home. Aurora thought in her head how her parents will feel about seeing her again after not seeing her for 2 weeks. Will they be happy to see her, or will they be the angriest she has ever seen them? She asked of Moonshadow, do you want to come with? Moonshadow didn't know what to say at first, but after thinking about it for a little bit, he decided to go. It took Aurora and Moonshadow 5 hours to walk to the gates of Aurora's castle by foot from the kingdom of Worcestershire. Aurora's heart was going at the speed so fast she couldn't even hear it, while Moonshadow was terrified to meet the king and queen after knowing all the crazy stories about them. Aurora reached for the gates, but before she could even touch it, hundreds of guards came running towards them. They were taken to the throne room. Aurora went inside while Moonshadow stayed outside the throne room. As soon as Amelia and Alexander saw Aurora, they didn't have another thought and ran right up to hug her, and they both gave her the biggest hug a human can possibly give. The king and queen both started asking millions of questions as a father and mother to their daughter. "Where were you?" said Amelia. "Are you okay?" said Alexandra. "Are you hurt?" said Amelia. "Were you kidnapped?" said Alexandra. Aurora tried to answer the millions of questions. So that's the throne room. The whole castle is kind of like blue. If you saw in this picture with the king and the queen and the daughter, you will see that the background is kind of blue. So the throne room is also blue, and every room of the castle is blue. And this throne room looks so bougie and so posh and so seems like it fits right into a castle. "No, I was not kidnapped. Yes, I am fine. I actually made a friend while I was gone." "Who?" said the queen. Aurora looked at the door and called out, "You can come in." Moonshadow stepped inside the throne room, feeling terrified is an understatement. As soon as both Amelia and Alexander saw Moonshadow, they both looked at him with mouths so far open they could eat the whole world, and surprise in their eyes. The king and queen couldn't say or do anything for what felt like forever, until they both cried at the same time, "Adrian!" Moonshadow and Aurora exchanged confused looks. "You have come back home," said Amelia. "Wait, what?" said Moonshadow. I know, said Alexandra softly. "Let us tell you both a story." They all sat on the ground of the throne room to listen. "Aurora, you know that story I told you about that little boy who went into the woods and was taken by the gnome?" said Alexandra. "Yes," replied Aurora. "Well, how about I tell you the whole story?" And so Alexandra began. "Before you were born, Aurora, your mother and I had a son." Aurora had her mouth open with shock because she had no idea she had a sibling. But one night when he was 8, him and his friends went exploring in the middle of the night. They walked all the way to the Forbidden Woods border, and your brother was the first to cross it. One of the gnomes saw him cross the border and wanted to know what he was up to. But as soon as they saw your brother's face, they knew. "Knew what?" said Moonshadow at the edge of his seat. The king continued. "They knew he was the long-lost king of the gnomes." "What? How can my brother be the long-lost king of the gnomes?" Aurora asked. "Because," Alexandra began to explain, "because your grandmother was a gnome." "What? I am part gnome?" says Aurora, astonished. "Well, yes," says Amelia. "Your grandmother on your father's side was born a gnome and ruled the gnome kingdom." "You mean the kingdom of Worcestershire?" Aurora and Moonshadow said at the same time, correcting her. "Yes," said the queen, "but one day a dangerous creature came and threatened to end all of gnomekind unless Queen Willow—" "I know Queen Willow. She is famous in the gnome world," Moonshadow said, interrupting. "Oh, wow," said the queen, unless Queen Willow turns into a human and marries the creature, which we later found out is actually a human disguised as a creature. So there's Queen Willow. Queen Willow looks so pretty. And there's, of course, like the evil guy that's pretending to be a creature but is actually a human and is about to like end all gnome kind unless Queen Willow does something about it. So that's why Queen Willow is standing there saying, wait, like before you end all gnome kind, I will marry you, it's okay, kind of thing. And she did, but she ended up loving him, and then your father came along. So your 8-year-old brother became the king of the gnomes. But we didn't know until much later. But why didn't you go and get him back? Aurora said with concern. We tried, but they wiped his memory of us. And he is in the place where he belongs. Which is true, considering Queen Willow was a gnome before a human, said Alexandra. So we had to let him go, said Amelia sadly. Until today, when he walked through those doors a few minutes ago. Aurora, your new friend, Moonshadow, is your brother, Amelia said hopefully. Moonshadow and Aurora both looked at each other and said, What? You're my brother? Said Aurora. And you're my sister? Said Moonshadow, still as confused as Aurora. A few minutes later, Moonshadow began to think, I never really knew my parents, actually. And actually, come to think of it, I can't remember any of my childhood at all, he said. Yeah, the gnomes wiped your memory to protect you, said Alexandra. I have millions of questions, said Moonshadow. Me too, said Aurora. But can we start with why you called me Adrian? Said Moonshadow. Of course, said Amelia. I know this is all to be very confusing. She continued to say, Your birth name is Adrian, but the gnomes changed it when they found you. Wow, Adrian? Said Moonshadow, trying to say his own name to see if it sounds right, and it didn't. Now what? Said Aurora. Does he live here with us in the castle? Well, said the king and queen excitedly, we would love to have you stay in the castle with us if you would like to. Moonshadow said, that sounds amazing, and I would love to stay here and get to know you all. Alexandra and Amelia were starting to smile, but stopped suddenly when Moonshadow continued, but I can't stay in the castle. I have a kingdom of my own now that I can't just abandon. Sorry. We understand, said Amelia and Alexandra sadly. But you are always welcome to come and stay with us, Adrian, said Alexandra. Thank you so much, said Moonshadow. He wanted to say parents, but was not ready yet, so instead said, Your Majesty. The next day, Moonshadow headed back to his kingdom of Worcestershire, with his sister escorting him. They said their goodbyes, but Aurora said, We should rather call it See You Later. Moonshadow agreed. So this is the dining room. Again, the whole castle's blue and every single room is blue. So of course the dining room is blue and it looks as fancy as the throne room. And I feel like the throne room and the dining room look so similar. Like they really do look like they came out of the same castle, which I love. They have already made plans to have dinner next weekend. That's why. The dining room. The night of the dinner, Moonshadow was going through his library trying to find a book one of the gnomes had asked for, but stumbled upon a book called Transformation. He opened to a page that was written in Queen Willow's handwriting, and he jumped back when he read the spell that transforms him from human to gnome. Moonshadow was standing there in awe and confusion because he could turn himself back to his true self. He could live with his family, but he would have to say goodbye to the kingdom of Worcestershire. He sat for a second in sadness, but then got an idea that could change everything. So this is the spell book that says transformation, and I love this spell book. It is so pretty. It's got so much detail in it, from the beautiful leaves to that kind of looks like a butterfly. I don't know, what do you guys see? It's such a pretty book, and this book is the book that changed Queen Willow from gnome to human and could do the same for Moonshadow. He ran over to Amelia and Alexandra's castle as soon as he got the idea, which is a good thing because he is running late for their dinner. When he arrived, he saw Aurora and told her his idea. I found this spell book in my library that is Queen Willow's handwriting that could change me back into a human again. Whoa, said Aurora. This is big news. But are you going to? Well, Moonshadow started to say, what if I use this spell to bring magical creatures and humans back to being friends again? That would be amazing if you could, said Aurora. Let's try the spell, said Aurora and Moonshadow. Moonshadow said the magical words, and then suddenly there was a light that was so bright they both couldn't see a thing. So this is the spell book opened, and they're about to grant the spell that, if works, could make humans and creatures be friends again like they were before the king and queen drove them all away, because the king and queen were scared that they might take their daughter because they took their son, right? So now he's saying, if the spell works, we could all come together again. And so that's the spell book opened up, and that's the spell coming out, and it's going to change everything. But what are these two words right here? The end.